Welcome back. So we're going to talk about some other kinds of cultures that you may see. Now, these are not mutually exclusive categories. An organization could actually serve as multiple ones of these simultaneously. I'll give a few examples as needed. But the first is what we call an innovative culture. Innovative cultures are normally stereotyped like as the tech-oriented cultures. They focus on being kind of first in line with the new inventions and new products, being kind of hip and trendy. They tend to be characterized by very, very flat organizational hierarchies, i.e. low power distance culture, and there's just a quick turnaround on pretty much all of their products and services. Most of your tech companies in Silicon Valley are stereotyped as innovative cultures, but that's not always the case. One of my favorite books is a book called Maverick by Ricardo Semler. It's about a company in Brazil called Simco that made industrial pumps. If you've ever worked as a dishwasher, like a family restaurant like I did, the Hobart line of dishwashing machines that you find in restaurants is a Simco product. But they also had a very innovative culture. And the idea is that managers were able to make decisions on the spot, do a quick turnaround. You didn't always have to check with management for everything you needed. So very theory Y and very low power distance culture. Okay. Aggressive organizations, so whereas innovative organizations focus on coming up with the next big thing, having a quick turnaround, almost being like a whole team of inventors and artists, aggressive cultures focus predominantly on beating the competition. So this is a very high pressure, high stress oriented environment where the focus is always on how are we doing in comparison to our competitors. That's the aggressive culture. There's also outcome-oriented, which can be in some ways similar to an aggressive culture. Outcome-oriented cultures are the ones that are constantly measuring employee performance according to some sort of a metric, right? So you're rewarded for succeeding or you're punished for, failure. So one great example of outcome-oriented organization that was also very aggressive was GE under Jack Welch, right? So, for the Rockstar employees, they were promoted very quickly up the hierarchy, those people that were willing to put in all the extra hours. The people that were, I think it was the bottom 25% or the bottom third of the hierarchy, they were pretty much cut immediately. The middle of the group was encouraged to maybe do a little bit better. They were given usually one or two more times, and if they still couldn't come up to the top performer level, they were simply fired. So when you're dealing with both aggressive and outcome-oriented cultures, yes, it can motivate and it can push everybody to be their best. That's a good thing. The bad thing is it can engage, you can have what we call counterproductive behaviors. Where in other words, people are trying to hurt each other in order to get ahead. And that's not productive. I'll give a couple of examples. Now some of you are my students watching this, you'll get a kick out of this. Where I went to undergrad, I was not in a business school, I was in a school of art and sciences. But where I went to undergrad, at one time I understand that school had a curve such that the average grade was always a B-. The average was a B-. So if the average score was 70%, 70 was a B-. But when you got a bunch of smart people, it also meant that if the average grade was a 95, because the exam was so easy, and you got like a 90, you'd be getting a C because 95 was the average. So what that taught individuals to do is more or less to lie, cheat, and steal. They would go out of their way to hurt their colleagues to try to bring the scores down so that they could get a little bit of an advantage. You would have people going to the library and ripping pages out of the textbooks on file, people going up the emergency exits to the top of the building and throwing books off the top, and then fishing the books out in the bushes. I didn't see a lot of that when I was there, but I understand that that was something that may have happened in the past. Okay, so that's also aggressive and outcome-oriented cultures. And of course, the classic example, even though it's not an organization, would be ancient Sparta, right? Spartans were taught to lie, cheat, and steal to get ahead. You were only punished if you got caught. Okay, so aggressive and outcome-oriented are somewhat interrelated here. You also have stable organizational cultures. Stable cultures are the ones that are slow-moving, that are bureaucratic. They're good with dealing with routine situations, but very bad at dealing with novel situations. A lot of manufacturing cultures are seen to be as very stable, as is government service. Again, thinking about the post office, stability is good. People could go to the post office and they know that they could buy heart stamps or American flag stamps They didn't deal very well with a lot of variation in the products or services that were offered. So stability was actually a good thing, right? You didn't need a lot of innovation. Stability also tends to be very theory-X, by the way. There's organizations that are what we call people-oriented. The idea of a people-oriented culture, I remember reading one organization that said, mission first, but people always. Okay? And the idea was that how you treat people matters as much as what your bottom line is. And if you believe it, Howard Schultz wrote a really, really good book on how he founded Starbucks and all that kind of stuff. And he talked about his emphasis on how people mattered more than anything else in the organization. If you do right by your people will do right by you. So there's some good and bad things about that. The good thing is, if you have loyal employees, they'll break their backs for you. You know, they always say that if people fear you, they'll fight for you, but if they love you, they'll die for you. People-oriented cultures, if you have that family atmosphere, people will go above and beyond. They'll always try to do the right thing. It may not actually be the right thing, but at least they're trying. Of course, the bad thing is, human resources are expensive. It costs a lot to invest in people. You can also be very, very soft with people if you're too people-oriented. And of course, the bad thing is sometimes you're really great to people and they still leave. You have team-oriented cultures, whereas organizations like aggressive and outcome-oriented cultures, you know, really reward individual performance. Team-oriented cultures tend to focus on rewarding intact teams. Teams that stay together and thrive together are the ones that are rewarded. Teams that fall apart are usually going to result in people getting fired. So the idea is to focus on, you know, consensus and team building, and that's kind of the main unit. There's also detail-oriented cultures. These are the ones that rely on data, analytics, and information in order to make decisions. There's not a lot of intuition or hunches that guide decision making. It's very data-driven or detail-oriented. Great examples of these tend to be data companies like IBM, Microsoft, where they're looking, you know, huge data sets that are helping them assess customers, assess viability of products, etc., etc. There's also service-oriented. These are the customer is always right kind of organizations, and employees are usually liberated, they're empowered to do what's right for the customer, sometimes in very, very flexible ways. And then they're safety-oriented. Anytime you work in an organization, the Army is one of them, but construction, this is also applicable. The idea is that safety comes first. And it makes sense, because if you have an organization where somebody is getting hurt or employees are routinely getting hurt, that's very costly for the organization, A, because you've got to replace the employee, but it can lead to lawsuits, it's bad for morale. So safety-oriented is also usually something that goes pretty well in hand with people-oriented cultures, because you're focusing on making sure that people work in a safe environment. Fantastic. So these are some other kinds of culture. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And again, remember, these are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes they kind of go hand in hand with other kinds of cultures. By the way, with the models and ontologies that we present in our first module, ask yourself, you know, which kinds of culture here go with which kinds of ontologies, and try to mix and match them a little bit. I think this is an interesting intellectual exercise, because again, your model or ontology that you have in the background, that's going to influence your mission, your vision statement. That's in turn going to be some sort of reflection in your organizational culture. As always, I hope you like this video. Hit that thumbs up, that's a like. Definitely hit that subscribe button and hit the bell. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.